Great. Hi, everybody. Welcome today. I'm Adam Greif. I'm the CEO and co-founder for Avica. For those of you for whom this is the first, you're learning of Avica, we produce digital content and educational content for people with disabilities and those who care for them. So you can always check out our website, avica.io. You can explore more webinars, more videos. There's articles written by professionals as well as reviews of technology and things of that nature. And check out a world that's built just for you. So we're so glad that everybody could make it today. We're really excited about the content that we're presenting and our speaker today, Dr. Naomi Greif-Sapieha. This is some really important content that often doesn't get enough exposure or talked about enough. So thank you, Naomi, for being with us today to go over this important content. Here is the agenda for the webinar today. We're just going to start with a quick word about our sponsors, Control Bionics. And then we're going to get right into the presentation. That's going to be about 30 minutes long. After the presentation, we're going to be fielding questions and giving you time to ask questions of Naomi and respond to as many as we can get to. You'll see in the Zoom software that there is a Q&A feature. So if you just want to click on that button at the bottom of your Zoom window, you can launch that and post your questions in there. At the end of Naomi's presentation, we'll start going through those questions. And again, we'll get to as many as we can. Where we can't get to them, please feel free to email Avica. And you can email us at info@avica.io. And we'll make sure to pass on any additional questions to Naomi for her to review and see if she can help with. So on that note, let's start moving through this. So before we start anything, we need to say a big thank you to our sponsors, Control Bionics. They create a technology for accessing computers and tablets for people who have trouble accessing computer and tablets. They've spent many years refining something called the NeuroNode, which is a wearable device on your body that senses small muscle movements and translates that into actions on the computer screen. It can also with eye control and eye tracking, making it an even more powerful device. So I'm just going to play a quick video here that goes over some of the features of the NeuroNode and the Control Bionics Trilogy system. And right after that, we're going to flip right back over to Naomi, who's going to begin her presentation.
Meet the NeuroNode Trilogy, the latest assistive communication device from Control Bionics. The Trilogy is a Windows-based solution for those living with paralysis and loss of speech due to conditions like cerebral palsy, SMA, TBI, spinal cord injury, or ALS-MND. This device combines 3 access methods: touch control, eye control, and NeuroNode 3.0 control. Putting these access methods together allows for the fastest, most efficient communication speed while simultaneously reducing user fatigue. Not only does this solution provide a voice for the voiceless, but it also provides environmental control and native computer control. The 3-in-1 solution relieves the pressure of getting the right device for right now and provides a solution for the present and future. As a user's condition changes due to a progressive illness or daily fatigue, the NeuroNode Trilogy can adapt to that person's abilities using their preferred access method. The Trilogy is also backed by our industry-leading customer support. Contact us anytime, day or night, and our team will be there. There are many funding options available for the NeuroNode Trilogy, including funding support through Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance, the Veterans Administration, and various departments of education. Visit our website at www.controlbionics.com to learn more, or give us a call at 513-453-4848 to schedule an assessment with your local representative.
So thank you again to our sponsors, Control Bionics. Without them, none of this would be possible. And they've gone as far as sponsoring a full webinar series that is tailored to parents caring for kids with complex needs. So stay tuned. Our next one's going to be in a couple of months on financial planning for parents caring for children with complex needs. And with that, I will turn this over to Naomi. And if you want to share your screen now.
Okay. Oh, just give me a second. Okay, I hope everyone can hear me. Yeah, okay. So thanks everyone for joining tonight. You know, it's a difficult time of evening after a long day, so we appreciate you being here. I wanted to just start by sharing a little bit about myself and what brings me here today. So as Adam mentioned, I'm a clinical health psychologist. I'm registered here in the province of Ontario, here in Canada. I think we have some people joining us from all over the place. So that's where I hail from. Health psychology is actually a subspecialty field of clinical psychology, which focuses on how biology, psychology, behavior, and social factors come together to really influence illness. And my particular area of expertise is to help my clients with the emotional toll of living with a chronic condition. And I also help them navigate making healthcare decisions and choices. And so that's sort of what a bit originally brought me here. And, you know, the field of health psychology is actually decades old. There's lots of research, there's lots of theory, and I draw on all of that to help my clients make the best decision and manage their care. But that's also what's informing my talk this evening. The strategies that I'm going to be sharing with you are all evidence-based and guided and rooted in research. But I also wanted to let you know that I'm actually the mom of 3 very special children, 2 girls and a brand new 3-month-old baby boy. And my second daughter was born with quite complex medical needs. And although I have seen lots with my clients, a range of different conditions, disabilities, abilities, all ways of coping, it's really my daughter who has been my greatest teacher of all and thrust me into this journey of a lived experience of learning what it is to navigate a healthcare system and to have to advocate for yourself and for your child's needs. Through her journey, I have lived in a pediatric hospital for almost a year. I have been to more outpatient appointments and clinics than I can possibly count. I have navigated special education schools and rehabilitation centers. And so believe me when I tell you that I understand what it is like, and I know what it is like to have to advocate for your child. I've been fortunate to have experiences that have been really wonderful and where interactions with healthcare providers where I have felt heard, listened to, cared for, and respected as part of the treatment team. But I have also had a number of interactions where, I felt belittled. I've left with feelings of frustration, of anger, sadness. I would even go as far as to say despair. So I know firsthand how difficult advocating can be, and I recognize that despite our best efforts, our advocacy is not always rewarded. And yet we keep trying because the truth is our children deserve the very, very best. But it's really hard. And as a matter of fact, the research suggests that parents of children with medical complexity actually have levels of something called post-traumatic stress disorder that are comparable with soldiers who go to war, that the trauma and the fight that we experience day in and day out in caring for our children is actually at a level that is comparable to soldiers who actually go into combat. The research would suggest that actually 10 to 20% of parents of medically fragile children actually meet the clinical criteria for this disorder and require treatment. And I think when I was preparing for this talk, I found this quote by one parent that I thought was very telling. I think the hardest part of having a child with a delay of any kind is the fight. It's the fight for services. It's the fight for people to understand who your child is and what they need. It's the fight for knowledge, because knowledge is power. And it's the quiet fight you have within yourself, wondering if you've left no stone unturned. And all of this is exhausting. And so it is my hope today that by marrying my professional and my lived experience, I can convey to you some hopefully useful strategies so that you can have them in your tool belt the next time you have to advocate, the next time you go to an appointment, be it in the educational system or the medical system or any system you find yourself in, that you have these tools to perhaps make that experience a little bit better and actually less of a battle. Okay, so let's jump in. Sorry, what I'm going to do today is actually tell you what we're going to talk about. Why does advocacy feel like such a fight all the time? Because I think it's important to get the background on that, and then the strategies, okay, so that we have a clear sense of where we're going. So why is advocating so difficult? And I think here what we can do is actually break encounters into two different components. The first component is our situational factors, things that are a little bit beyond our control, but have to do with where we find ourselves in the environments in which we're advocating for our children. So these situational factors can include things like medical language. For many of us, you were thrown into this world and you have to learn a whole new language of medical terms and knowledge. That can be overwhelming and intimidating. And we do it and we become experts, but it doesn't mean that it makes the advocacy in that room any easier. Another thing is appointment length. Oftentimes you're not given a lot of time with a practitioner. So getting your point across, you have to be concise and direct and quick. And that can be very difficult for many people. There's also differing opinions, on parental involvement. I'm sure many of you have heard the term, patient-centered care or family-centered care, but different practitioners and different institutions have different ideas about what that means. And so if you're not on the same page as your practitioner, it may be difficult to get your point across. Similarly, if you have different expectations of the goal of this encounter, that's going to be a very different experience between the two parties in the room. So that makes it a little bit more difficult to navigate. I've listed 4 here. I think that if I polled the audience at the moment, you could probably list me a whole bunch more situational factors that sort of influence how you're able to communicate with your healthcare provider. The problem with situational factors is that often we don't have the control over changing them. And so what I want to focus on today is actually more of the internal factors, and the biggest one being what we bring to the table, and that is our level of stress. And stress is really, it's really important to understand stress because stress makes it very difficult to communicate. And quite frankly, I think if I asked any parent, not even one who's navigating medical complexity of any kind, it is incredibly stressful when your child is unwell, or it is incredibly stressful when your child needs something and cannot access it. Those are one of the biggest stressors for parents. So when we are faced with this time and time again, we are coming to it with a lot of stress. So let's understand the relationship between stress and communication. Take a step back for a moment and let's talk about stress and the stress response. So ideally, we'd love to live in a world where there was no stress, right? But that doesn't exist for anybody. And in fact, we actually do want to feel stress. It is adaptive to feel stress because when you are faced with a threat, a true threat, you want your body to be able to respond appropriately. Our systems in our body biologically adapted many, many, many years ago. If you go back to our ancestors and cavemen, and as far back as you can probably think of, there was always some kind of threat. And in that environment, the threat was actually like violent life or death conflict, right? So you leave your cave and you are faced with a predator, a saber-toothed tiger right in front of you, okay? Or there's a tribe, coming to attack you from the area next door. Like these things are actual real life or death situations that they would be faced with, people would be faced with. And in situations like that, you actually only have two options for survival. One, you can fight as hard as you can, right? Or number two is you can run away as fast as you can. But in either event, you need to move quickly, because if you're faced with a tiger, I mean, it'd be nice to say, hey, tiger, just wait here for a little while I go like bulk up my muscles at the gym and come back and I'll deal with you later. Well, guess what? That's not the way life works. So instead, your body has to prepare to fight off that tiger or to run as fast as you can. And it's actually really remarkable that our body has created this emergency system to do just that. It actually reorganizes all of your body's resources to make sure that you have enough blood pumping to those muscles and oxygen getting to your lungs to escape or fight your threat. And that is what's known, I'm sure some of you have heard of this, as the fight or flight response, okay? Essentially, the flight or fight response is really an instant mobilization of the brain and the nervous system and the body for the extreme use of energy, you can put it that way, to face the immediate threat. Okay, so physiologically, what happens in your body is you actually, there are a lot of there's a cascade of changes. So there's a release of adrenaline into your bloodstream, and that releases actually extra blood flow to your muscles. Your heart rate will increase. You'll increase your breathing. You'll have a more efficient transportation of oxygen to the lungs for that reason. These might be things that you're actually, if you're listening to them, think about times when you're nervous, right? Or stressed. These are things you're going to feel your heart beat faster. You're going to so in the face of a real threat, these things are very, very adaptive. And you'll actually get also some psychological changes with that too. Because if you're trying to run away from a tiger, you don't want to be calculating, if I run to the left, the distance is 2.4 kilometers and I can run at X speed. If I run to the right, no. You just want to run, right? You just need to get out of the way. So just like your body goes to extremes, your mind will go to extremes too. You become a very black and white thinker under times of stress. There is no room for creativity here, okay? And your emotions get intensified, particularly anger and fear. The trouble is that these days, and when we're advocating for our children, if the threat in front of you is, my healthcare practitioner is not listening, they're not hearing what I'm saying, and I'm not getting what my child needs, and that is your threat, that is your stress cue, what we actually need to do is to be calm and not go into flight or fight. Right? So it's actually the opposite of what the stress response is priming you innately to do. And that makes it very difficult to communicate effectively. Because what will happen is you will automatically, remember this is an automatic reaction, you will automatically start your body's process to go into either fight mode, okay? Which would then lead, if you're ready to fight, if you're ready to yell at someone, if you're ready to say, that's it, my heart is racing, my adrenaline's pumping, I'm ready to get you, you end up coming off as angry and aggressive, okay? Or you take the opposite approach, which is, I'm going to escape, I can't handle this right now, I can't deal with you. And then you just become passive, which, to be honest, when you get home from that encounter, typically leads to the other response, which is aggression, because you've now held it all in and then you explode later, okay? And the reason that happens is because, again, the way you're appraising this threat, the way you're thinking about the situation, because of the flight or fight response, becomes so automatic, it becomes so rigid, it becomes extreme and narrow and black and white, and it doesn't leave room for negotiation. So our goal actually for effective communication is actually to suppress the flight or fight response, which is not an easy task, okay? The other complicating factor for those of us parents of medically complicated children is that we're not faced with a saber-toothed tiger one time. We are faced over and over and over again with the stress of having to make these decisions, with the stress of having to fight for what our children need, and that becomes chronic stress. That is exhausting because this system was set up for quick in and outs, right? Get away from the tiger and then shut off. And there is actually a shut off switch without getting into too many of the details of it, but there is a shut off switch. And the problem when things become so chronic is that we never turn that off. And so constantly pumping blood to your, extremities, constantly getting your heart rate up. Not only does it have psychological effects and exhaustion, but it also affects our physical health. So it's really important to make sure that we have effective strategies to suppress our stress in order to effectively communicate with our healthcare practitioners. So that's where I kind of want to start, okay? So number one, here's a couple of strategies, and I think that these slides, this video will be shared somewhere after in case you can't get it all right now. You'll be able to come back and use this as a resource in a bit. Strategy number one. Recognize your emotions, okay? Now, your emotions can be very difficult to recognize when you're stressed. And that's because, like I said, you're not thinking really clearly. What I tell my patients is that you always want to make a decision. You never want to make a decision from a place of stress. Well, the problem is that when we're advocating for our children, that is the most stressful thing in the world. I can't tell you to say you need to make that you can make a decision from a place where you're not stressed. So recognize the stress first and foremost, and recognize the emotion. Don't let that part of your brain sort of take over, okay? That's not to say that you should ignore your emotions. If you need to punch and scream and cry into a pillow, you do that as often as you need to before your appointment, because a powerful advocate will do that and then must compose themselves to stay calm in the medical encounter, okay? Because you need to rely on facts and not emotion in order to get your point across. If you start screaming and the emotions start coming, that actually triggers that exact same stress response in the person in front of you. And then their response is to come back and react, right? They're either going to go into their flight or fight mode. And so sometimes when you get a defensive reaction from the person in front of you, don't forget this is a relationship that they're going to get, and they might become more aggressive if your tone is aggressive too, because they perceive that same threat, okay? So I said, okay, just sort of compose yourself and be calm. Well, how do you do that? Okay, so let's take a moment. Now, I don't know if any of you have heard of sort of these deep breathing exercises, and it might sound trite, but it actually does work. So what I would encourage you to do, if you have hands right now, if you're feeding your kids dinner or doing a bunch of other things, then you can do this later. But if you have the ability to, I just want you to sit comfortably in front of your computer screen, as comfortable as you can be at the moment, okay? Put one hand up here, sort of just below on your chest, and one just below your ribs. You can't see where I'm doing it, but just below your ribs, kind of on your tummy, okay? Take a deep breath in through your nose and let your belly push your hand out, okay? So as you take your breath in, your belly should fill with air. Your hand should be pushed up, but your chest actually should not move. Belly breathing is actually a way to really take a deep breath, okay? A really calming deep breath. Now, do that one more time. So deep breath in through your nose, let your belly fill with air. And now breathe out through pursed lips, almost like you're whistling. Feel that hand on your belly descend. It'll start to go down as you push all the air out. Again, the hand on your chest should just be resting there. It really will not move all that much. Try that again. In through your nose, belly fills with air, and then out through pursed lips. Now, we don't have the time to do this sort of 10 times right now, although you can continue if you'd like, of course. But when you do that about 3 to 10 times and you take your time with each breath, you'll notice how you feel at the end of the exercise, that your body, what you're actually doing here is calming that physiological system. That stress response that's really building up automatically you're actually bringing it down. And in bringing it down, you're allowing your thoughts to sort of involve more creativity now. You're allowing those facts to come. And the emotions, like I said, remember, the emotions get heightened with stress. That actually starts to calm slightly, okay? So if you can do that, there are other strategies as well. There are things called visual imagery, where you can sort of picture yourself in a space that's really one that you like think so fondly of, or a beach, a calming one. There's tons of apps and websites, and if you need references for those, we can provide them as well. But the idea is to just take a step back from your emotions for a moment before going into strategy number 2. And strategy number 2 is actually to be prepared. Okay, so remember, you have the right to request preparation time. Okay, you don't. So I used to find this very difficult when I was an inpatient, because you would have someone just show up at your door and then want to have a conversation right then or there without the ability to really compose your thoughts, right? Or know what you want to say and what you want to get across. As a patient, you can know your rights too and ask for time to prepare to speak to your healthcare provider or your education provider. You want to prepare your argument in advance so that it's clear and straightforward. And in order to do that, the best thing to do is to do that deep breathing first and then start your argument. Identify your goal and also what would be an acceptable outcome, okay? Because sometimes in these conversations, you're going to get times where maybe the outcome that you really want is not necessarily possible. The point of this conversation is not necessarily get your way, but it's to have a proper conversation where you understand and you make decisions together that are in the best interest of your child. Oftentimes, it's up to parents to say, we're the ones who can see the bigger picture here, right? You might have a healthcare provider. My daughter saw, I think at last count, 13 different practitioners. Each of them wants to recommend something else. But as a parent, I had to put all of those together, right, and see the bigger picture. So sometimes that is really where I found my role, and I needed to be able to articulate that in a way that could come across to the healthcare provider in an acceptable way. So strategy 2, take that time and get yourself prepared. You don't need to think on the spot necessarily. Now, it's one thing to take your deep breaths, to be prepared, to be calm, to go in level-headed. But what do you do when you're actually in the room with the healthcare provider? How can we make our point more effectively heard? So with stress, with flight or fight, as you know, as I showed you, if you end up in sort of that fight mode, you come across often as aggressive, right? If you end up in the flight mode, you come across as passive. And you actually don't even need to think about a medical encounter to understand this. This has to do with any conflict in communication. So with a partner, with a parent, with a friend, anyone. You've heard probably with passive, you've probably heard of aggressive. There's even something called passive aggressive. We want none of that here. What we want is for us to be assertive. And often it is the case that people confuse aggressive with assertive. But that is not the case at all. In fact, assertive communication is when you confidently and respectfully communicate your needs without infringing on the rights of the other person. Okay, so in aggression, you infringe on the rights of the other person, you attack. When you're passive, you're not communicating your needs confidently. This is that middle ground where you are confidently stating your case without, crossing those boundaries in an aggressive way. And that's really useful because it builds trust on both sides, and it allows for much more effective communication, okay, between parties. I'll be honest, you can take courses on assertive communications. There's a lot to cover, but if I could give you sort of a nugget in this talk of things that you can do to make your communication style more assertive, it's this. I want you to remember the 3 F's. You can use your imagination, but I'm going to tell you what they are. The first one is facts, okay? What you want to say is an objective description of the situation. You focus on the here and now, and you focus on action and not on character. Okay. This is true whether you're advocating in a healthcare environment, in an education environment, or with your partner. What you don't want to do is attack the other person. The second you attack character, that becomes a threat to them. And again, their stress response is triggered. Okay. So you want to try to really focus on the facts. I'm going to give you, once I go through the 3 F's, I'll give you an example so that it becomes a little bit clearer. Second F is feelings. Okay. You want to express the emotional impact that this has on you. When I say you don't want, so you might remember number 1, right? Strategy number 1, I said, oh, don't be emotional. That's not what I mean. What I mean is that you can still say how this decision is making you feel. You can use your words to say that as opposed to bringing the tone of an overwhelmed emotion into the room. And don't forget that the person across from you is a person, right? They have their own feelings. They have their own thoughts. So you need to understand and acknowledge out loud that other person's feelings too. It's not only about you. There are 2 parties in the room here. Facts, feelings, and fair request. Okay? A specific outcome that can be reasonably achieved where you're clearly simply stating your point of view. So let me give you an example. The first fact, okay? I don't know how many times I was told this, but the appointment plan that was made for my child requires me to have 6 hospital visits over the next 3 weeks. Okay? That's a fact. Okay. Feelings. All right. So why are we having 6 appointments here? Maybe because, so what I say to my practitioner is, I understand, that you're trying to ensure that my child is being checked on and being checked on well and regularly, right? And that you want what's best for them. But with this plan, I feel like you're not considering our quality of life and the disruption of how many appointments that causes for my child, the missed amount of school, the difficulties of us getting to hospital, the expense, the days off work, right? Here you really want to use I statements. I did not attack their plan, okay? I said, I recognize that you are trying to help me in the best interest of my child, but I feel, and use those words, I feel that you're not considering X, Y, and Z, okay? And then what is a fair request at the end? Well, maybe a fair request, if this is the example, is can we work together to see if we can combine appointments or do some of these virtually, right? These are things that perhaps a practitioner didn't think of or didn't think it was a big deal. These are, when we're advocating for our children and for the life at home, they don't often see our home life, right? So we're trying to give them that bigger picture. A fair request would be, can we try to make that work? It can come across as a question, but it's a confident question, right? And you are allowed to ask questions. Never be fearful to ask questions in an appointment. Asking questions does not equal aggression. You can respect your healthcare provider without revering them, okay? You do not have to agree all the time. Being agreeable doesn't make you a good patient or a good advocate, but respectfully questioning is when you are heard and listened to. So facts, feelings, and fair request, okay? And the last strategy, because I'm already on minute 28 of my 30 minutes here, is to make sure that you record keep and document, okay? So have all your documents ready in an appointment. During an appointment, there is no shame in taking notes, okay? Stress, like I told you, remember, overwhelms you. That limbic system in your brain starts flashing, that emergency center, that alarm, right? That's going to take over everything, and it makes thinking and remembering very difficult. So go ahead and take notes. And if it takes more time, that's okay. You want to have a record, and you want to bring those records as you advocate, because the truth is, with our children, I always said, I have one patient, right? I have one child I have one person that I'm bringing to the hospital here, but your practitioner will have hundreds, if not thousands. And while we would love for them to remember every detail of every encounter of ours, right? It may be unrealistic. And so set your expectations for realistic, and come back with them and say, in this appointment, this is what was said. And you can always bring that back. You can always question that. You can always refer back to it, and it helps. It helps the practitioner too. On the practitioner side, I can say that, it helps me too to be reminded of things that perhaps I have forgotten. Okay, so make sure that you take the notes and make sure you stick with them. And honestly, those 4 strategies will get you started. None of this is easy. It's all hard and it all takes practice. So be kind to yourself. And what I really, really want you to remember is that you will make mistakes sometimes. I made plenty, but I want you to never underestimate yourself, because I like this quote very much. You never underestimate the parent of a child who has special needs. They may appear exhausted and at times overwhelmed. Excuse me. However, they are more capable, creative, and extremely resilient, and we will persevere even in the most challenging situations. So you do have this. All right, I like this little kid. He's not mine, but he's very cute. And you do have it. I'm going to take a break for a quick water break here, but I am happy to answer any questions that you have, and hope that this was helpful and that these strategies serve you well. And I believe that if you practice them, you will get it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Naomi. Take a break there for a second. Have a glass of water. And in the meantime, so there aren't any questions yet in the Q&A field. There's a couple of ways that we can do this. So if you have questions, if there's a scenario that you'd like to work through and specifically, we can post that in here. Or if you want to generalize it for Naomi and she can respond, that's also okay. We can do it through raising your hand and allowing you to ask verbally if you like. So at the bottom of the Zoom window, there is a button for raising your hand, or you can go into the Q&A feature and post your questions there by text, or in the chat window if you'd like to do it there too. So we'll give you guys a couple of minutes here to see what comes in. And then if nothing comes in, then, we'll say thank you to Naomi and we'll sign off a little earlier so everyone can get back to their kids.
And I think sometimes these questions are difficult to answer on the spot. So if anyone has any questions that come up later, as we said, excuse me, you can always email Vika and they'll get a hold of me.
Yes, that's right. So again, the email address to get in touch with us is info@avika.io. And we'll be happy to pass on any questions to Naomi for her review. We have one question coming in. How do you best advocate when the medical team disagrees with you and insists on continuing treatment that you don't feel is effective or safe?
I think it's a very tough question, but I think that what's helpful in that instance is to take a step back from the treatment itself and explain to them why you feel that treatment is the wrong treatment for your child. So what I find for most parents is that the medical team sort of stops hearing. They're very focused on the actual treatment itself and stops hearing a little bit about what that treatment means for your lifestyle. So I can give an example of my daughter's feeding tube, where the schedule of the feed was such that, yes, for her, for the calories she needed, and for as much as for her heart function and all that kind of stuff, yes, this was the prescription to follow, but it became horribly dictative of our life and of our ability to get out of the house and of our ability to also help with the other children at home. And so sometimes taking a step back and explaining that to them, and then you can ask them why this is the best treatment in their opinion, and respond to their answers. So make sure you're listening to what they do have to say so that your responses actually match what they're telling you, okay? And see if then your request is not necessarily not to do it, but to have a conversation to better be able to navigate that decision, because at the end of the day, it is your decision to make, and it has to fit with what you feel best. So in that assertive communication, you really want to make sure you're using those I statements. You're telling them what it is that you're worried about, and express your concerns in a confident way, and ask them to respond to those, and then make the best decision. Adam, you're muted. I can't hear what the question is.
I was actually just thanking the poster for the question. If you have any follow-ups, feel free to drop them in the Q&A as well. So the next question here is, thank you for presenting. This is such a practical, concise, and user-friendly way. I am also a mom of 3 special needs kiddos. Currently, I find myself stuck between 2 departments in my son's hospital. No one seems to take responsibility for the fact that my child had to be seen in emergency 8 times in the last 6 weeks. One of the doctors is awake that there's a genetic condition in the family, but while has finally agreed to refer for testing, he wants to wait until the hospital's lab is less busy. In the meantime, my kid is being given medication with such adverse side effects that now I need other specialists involved. So I guess the question here is how to respond to this situation, or with so many specialists involved, how do you take control of the situation?
So first off, I just want to say that I'm really sorry that that's what you have to deal with. It sounds really, really like a difficult situation. My recommendation would be to write it all down. And when you have a number of practitioners who are involved and you have to navigate between a whole bunch of them, it ends up becoming a lot of he said, she said, and a lot of back and forth, and a lot of information gets lost. So I would record it. I would send it by email, write out your case, write out your arguments, explain to them. Again, you can sort of follow that assertive communication framework, write out the facts of what's going on, write out, acknowledge that maybe the labs are overwhelmed. It's a pandemic. There's all kinds of things going on. However, this is the effect that it has on me. This is the effect that it has on my family. This is the effect that it has on my child. And my child is a person who should not have to suffer, unduly. And I think when you state it that way, and then the last thing, which is your fair request, which is in a timely manner to have these tests completed, if I understand correctly, that should be done in a timely manner to mitigate the amount of time that your child has spent on unnecessary medication and experiencing unnecessary side effects. That is not an unfair request. And so I think that if you write it all out, and then I think if you can include everyone kind of in that email chain, to me, making sure everyone has access to the same information is important here. And hopefully will allow you the time also to process, to get your points across in a way that you intend to when you write. So you're not just sort of calling and cold calling and responding, but you've actually had that time to set aside to write this down, to email, to get all your facts straight, to get your feelings out there, and then to make your fair request. That would be my recommendation. And I really do hope it works for you. Best of luck with it.
Right, so we've got another question here, and of course, if there are any follow-ups, feel free to type them out. So the next question is: I have 2 kids with totally separate diagnosis. What do you suggest going forward with our medical records? Is it better to keep electronic or paper? And how far back do we keep these records? Or should we depend on the medical care to keep them all organized? Hope this question makes sense.
Yes, your question makes sense. I think that I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here. I think it's a matter of what you feel comfortable doing. To be honest, my hospital still gives paper copies after every appointment. So for me, I would just keep a binder and insert those in rather than electronic. So it just sort of depends on what you feel comfortable with. Because I started with the binder, if I had emails or electronic communication, I did print them out and put them all together. My recommendation is just that they are in one place and probably a separate binder for each of your children so that you have, everything for each child independently. But do whatever works for you. There isn't a right or wrong answer there. And in terms of how far back, I mean, if you, you've already been dealing with this for a while. So whatever you have available, put in, and otherwise just start from now and move forward. Don't beat yourself up for not having it before. And I think then as far back as, again, this is also a little bit individualized with the diagnosis. So certain diagnoses, of course, stretch back longer than others, or you might have noticed things more than others, but do whatever feels right for you. And I would just start from this point forward if you don't already have that.
Those were some great questions. Thank you, everyone, for submitting them. There aren't any more in the queue right now, but that certainly doesn't mean that the support isn't there for you. If you think of more questions or you leave here wishing that you'd gotten the answer to something that you thought of later. So please email us or get in touch with us at info@vika.io. And once again here, I want to thank our sponsors so much, Control Bionics. Making great technology that is allowing both children and adults with mobility and speech issues. They're giving them back a voice. They're giving them back a way to express themselves. I'm going to show one more video here about how the NeuroNode works just before we sign off. Please watch it if it's relevant for you. And if you would like more information about Control Bionics or what they do, you can email us or go to their website as well. So let me share this now.
At the heart of the Control Bionics product line is the NeuroNode 3.0, the latest generation of the world's leading wearable control device. The NeuroNode 3.0 connects to the user's communication device via Bluetooth and is attached to the user with the non-adhesive NeuroBand or a clinical-grade non-invasive electrode. The NeuroNode 3.0 has two built-in methods for access and activation of the user's communication device: EMG control or spatial control. When using EMG control, the NeuroNode 3.0 reads the signal associated with the activation of a muscle group from the surface of the user's skin. The NeuroNode 3.0 can be placed externally anywhere on the user's body. Two common placements are the forehead for eyebrow raise and the arm for finger and wrist flexion. The advantage of the EMG mode is that the device is advanced enough to read minor movements or, in some cases, just the intent of a movement. When using spatial control, the NeuroNode 3.0 maps its place in space, allowing the user to associate specific movement patterns to actions and activations on their communication device. The advantage of spatial control is that it allows the device to be placed over clothing and is not dependent on a specific muscle movement. Whether using EMG or spatial control, the user's activation settings are quickly and easily customized through the NeuroNode controller application that is pre-installed on their communication device. Settings in this application can accentuate intentional movement and filter out what is unintentional, making it a uniquely customizable solution for users with tremors or fasciculation. To learn more about the NeuroNode 3.0 or to schedule a demonstration with your local representative, visit us at www.controlbionics.com.
Okay, so that's it for us this evening. Thank you so much, Naomi, for sharing your experience and coming with us and for sharing all those helpful strategies. And thanks everyone for joining. Like Naomi said before, I'm sure it's been a long day for everybody, and we really appreciate the time and thoughtfulness for joining us today to hear what what Naomi had to communicate. So thanks, everyone. And please check out our website for more upcoming webinars. Like financial planning is the next one for caring for a child with complex needs. So hope to see everyone there, and we'll post and share that as well as it gets closer. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good night, everybody.